The fall session is coming up and Mark Carney has decided to put a pause on the EV mandate to do a review. And based on that, it sounds like there's going to be a lot of infighting, and a couple MPs aren't exactly too happy about that.
I wanted to pick up on the point around, in particular, Corey, EV mandates, clean fuel regulations, the idea that a review is happening. At the start of this week, I had people reaching out to me signaling that actually the announcement could go much further in rolling back key climate policies in the name of competitiveness. And the Prime Minister got a lot of questions about, like, what do you say to, Canadians who have that as still a big concern, but also from a political perspective, really significantly, like members of his own cabinet. My understanding is it was a fight around the cabinet table, around these issues. And ultimately what we ended up with at the end of the week was a lot less than was being signaled to me just a few days prior. What does that tell you, and how important do you think that kind of stuff will be?
9 years of virtue signaling, doesn't change overnight, is I guess the answer. This is as Scott mentioned, a huge shift towards the economy. And if there's one thing that you could say about the Trudeau government over its 9 years in power, is it didn't spend a lot of time talking about or thinking about the economy. They just, they talked about a lot of other things, climate change being one of the major topics, First Nations reconciliation. Not that there's anything wrong with those topics in and of themselves, but they always came across as disinterested. But the challenge for Carney is he's inherited a cabinet and a caucus largely made up of people who were down with that program, who were the architects of that program. Times have changed. The Prime Minister has changed. The agenda has changed. And the challenges the country is facing have changed. But the group of people making those decisions, with the exception of a few key people around the cabinet table and the Prime Minister himself, has not changed. And so I think trying to reconcile those two things is what we're watching go down in real time. And I think it explains a discrepancy between what people are trial ballooning to reporters and to journalists versus what we're seeing in announcements.
I think that Corey kind of hit the nail on the head. Like, I was told it's, by someone this week, it's like half of the room is still like in the Trudeau world.
If half of the Liberal Party is still in the Trudeau world, then Mark Carney is in serious trouble. The Conservative Party has little to no confidence in him. The NDP are battling themselves, trying to figure out who will become the leader of a party that doesn't really exist anymore. The Bloc are just hanging on by a thread, and the Green Party, well, they have one seat. With confidence dwindling in the Liberal Party, and clearly major arguments are happening around the cabinet meetings and I guess just day-to-day dealings with the party members, it really feels like it's only a matter of time before another election happens, whether it's a snap election or a non-confidence vote.
The principles that they espouse, particularly around climate, for example. So it's uncomfortable for them and also for others who feel like they can't go as far as they would like. How much politically do you think that matters, Kathleen?
Yeah, I think it's uncomfortable, but it's also because how the stories are being rolled out leads to headlines that basically is all about a reversal of Trudeau policy. So we've seen this summer, first, obviously, still in the spring, we saw the reversal of the carbon tax, then the, throwing out the digital services tax, and now the rollback of the EV mandate. And I think that, that makes those Trudeau caucus members uncomfortable. Essentially, what Carney's trying to do is memory hole all of the Trudeau policy platforms, essentially, vanish him from our memory. And I think that is going to be increasingly difficult as we approach a budget this fall, which will largely, it seems, be an austerity budget. So how does Carney frame that?
He said austerity, austerity and investment budget.
And he has to be successful, has to kind of try to reframe it as much as he can as, no, it's restrained, it's responsible investment. But if it comes across as austerity and cuts, he's going to lose on this. He'll lose that progressive flank that came to him, that lent him his vote in the last election. The announcement on Friday was strong. It had a lot of interesting things that are frankly a lot of common sense. Like, why aren't we using Canadian steel in Canadian projects? One quick example, the Jones Act in the United States. There's a law in the United States that makes any boat that is carrying U.S. goods between two U.S. places has to be made in America, crewed by Americans, and owned by Americans. We don't have that in Canada. In fact, BC Ferries just actually bought or signed a contract, I should say, for 4 ferries from a Chinese-owned company. Instead of using Canadian steel ensuring Canadian workers are employed. So, you know, the announcement was great, and it was a part of a series of announcements, sure, this whole summer that Carney's been rolling out. But I got to wonder, like, is it actually going to help workers? Because ultimately, the issue that Canadians are facing is still the affordability crisis. That's what they care about. So is it going to make their lives better, or is it just going to, you know, do the same kind of restructuring of economic policies that this government has done time and time again? They did it in 2017, they did it in 2015. Will it actually change Canadians' lives?
Well, I guess I wonder from a strategic perspective, just jumping off that point, like a lot of what is being announced, I think is necessary to address the economic crisis we're facing, Scott, but it is at like a macro level. I do feel, again, having been there for cabinet, talking to different people, there is a realization that they need to communicate and show Canadians that what they're doing will actually impact their lives. And I feel as though the opposition and the Conservatives have picked up on that, right? Like they're looking for ways in which they can contrast themselves and be sort of more out for your everyday life or your everyday concerns. How do you anticipate that shakes down in the fall session? How do you anticipate sort of the Liberals and the Conservatives will try and contrast themselves against each other?
Yeah, I think you put your finger on exactly the number one vulnerability that Mark Carney faces, because he is a macroeconomic thinker by definition and by history. That is his experience. That is his strength. That is why he's prime minister today. That's how he got to be in this position. But as the economic challenges continue to pile up, as jobs are shed, as growth stalls, as people start to feel that pinch in their day-to-day lives, he's got to translate that talk to the kitchen table. We know that Pierre Poilievre is good at that. He is sinister good at it. He is lethally good at it. Carney's going to have to find a way to turn the telescope around. He spoke on Friday with these massive suite of macroeconomic policies. Short-term supports, long-term structural incentives for change, but he's got to find a way to take that to the boots and laces crew who are actually working on the line. That's going to be the challenge for him. And if he leaves that space open, Pierre Poilievre will fill it. I just want to add one thing. This debate about that goes to Justin Trudeau hanging around in this caucus and cabinet, I think that Mark Carney's attitude toward that can be summed up in two words. Who cares? Come on. New economic realities and a boss who is sharp with his tongue to lash out at people. There is no one sitting in that caucus or cabinet saying, gosh, boss, I'm a little uncomfortable. That isn't the way we used to do it in the old days under Mr. Trudeau. That is over.
Well, but they do feel it. Like they're like, I don't disagree that the desire to express it has been clamped down on, but they certainly feel it. But I do know what you mean. Corey, Scott mentioned sort of openings for the Conservatives heading into the fall. What openings do you see for Poilievre in particular, and what potential vulnerabilities do you see?
Well, I think the opportunity is what you guys have already talked about, which is the affordability side, how these tough, challenging times that we're facing are going to impact people. But I think there's also a risk around these major projects that if they stall out, or if there's a lot of criticism around them as they roll out, it creates an opportunity for Poilievre. Carney basically took the Conservative campaign plan and platform and put it in the window and said you can have all of this, but without the jerk in charge. But that only works if you actually get these things done. And if you see major headwinds on the major projects, I think it creates an opportunity for Poilievre to say, look, that was our recipe, and we're going to bake that cake better than these guys can. So we'll see about that. But the challenge that the Conservatives will have is I think more personal around Poilievre himself. It's impossible to win an election if you've got a 30-point deficit on the other guy in terms of likability and best prime minister. I think Poilievre needs to soften the tone. I think he needs to have other people in his shadow cabinet out doing the hatchet work of attacking the government. And not be the lead attack dog every day in question period. I think that's part of what's made him so unlikable. And if he continues to be that unlikable going forward, he's going to have a heck of a time ever becoming prime minister.
I just think back to the federal debate when they were side by side actually debating one another. Mark Carney didn't look good then. He didn't look good debating Andrew Scheer and all the other Conservatives. And I can guarantee you, he's not going to look good when Poilievre comes back. Anyway, I would like to know what you think down in the comments section below. Hit that like button, hit that sub button if you are new, and thank you very much for watching.